welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica from Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Welcome. I am here today with the author Mark Leslie, who is you write horror, but your main series, the Canadian Werewolf series, it's like a mixture of a lot of things. But we're going to be talking today about your 20-year revival of One Hand Screaming,
Yeah.
which is definitely horror. So I'm really looking forward to this. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Mark, and tell us about One Hand Screaming.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I've been writing I realized last year when I was doing the 20 haunting years, the one hand screaming, I realized I've been writing for over 40 years because I got my very first rejection when I was about 15 years old, 1984. And I realized that 40 years later, I was releasing One Hand Screaming. So One Hand Screaming was a collection of horror stories. And as a writer, growing up on a typewriter and mailing manuscripts to publishers and all that, the going wisdom of the day was start building a name for yourself in the small fiction market. And then once you've gotten published in a few magazines and whatever, then an agent or an editor will take you seriously as a real author. And I had thousands of rejections over the years and had 100 or so stories published. And I'd never gotten anything that was in a book that like a magazine would be on the shelf for 1 month or 6 months or whatever. And so in 2004, I decided to self-publish a collection of short stories. It was about 140 pages, and it was just some previously published horror stories. And I went, I'm going to sneak it into self-publishing so I can have a book and make it available, print on demand, and go do book signings. And that was the beginning of the career because I've also signed deals with traditional publishers. I've gotten about a dozen books out from different traditional publishers, and I've also self-published like the Canadian Werewolf Urban Fantasy Humorous Adventure Action series. And then I realized 20 years was coming up since I published my first book, One Hand Screaming. And I thought, ooh, I'm going to do a double-sized edition because in the last 20 years, I've had a lot more horror stories published. I want to add some stuff. I want to add stuff that's never been seen before. I want to add all new notes, introduction, art, full page, two-page spreads, and make this available. And I did a big Kickstarter with a special edition and all that stuff. And that's when I realized, wow, I've been doing this for 40 years. And in doing it on both sides of traditional publishing, I just signed a deal with a traditional publisher about 6 months ago, and I'm just about to launch another self-published title in June. So I've been in the industry for a long time, and really, really, I mean, I'm a very passionate book nerd, and I love scaring people because I'm scared myself. And I think One Hand Screaming, a lot of the stories have been described as Twilight Zone meets Black Mirror meets American Horror Story. And sometimes there's some humor thrown in there too.
There's a little bit of what is it? Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Is that the Stephen King?
Yeah, yeah, like
I'm
that.
trying to. I don't know why
Yeah,
it escapes me because I love those stories and I love that
yeah.
book. But I did get a lot of that notes of that while I was reading
Oh,
one.
thank you so much. Wow. I wouldn't dare compare myself to the master, but yeah, that's the idea is that those
Yeah.
short stories and then notes behind the stories, which a lot of readers really enjoy getting that inside scene.
I mean, I think like one of the things that sort of connects all of those things, the Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, is you do get that touch of realism that makes you feel like this could have just happened next door. And I think that that's really something that's extremely important in horror is you really have to feel like this is tangible, this is believable. Funny note, I have twin 10-year-olds and they're they're pretty much on that level as they get scared a lot, but they like to be scared, but they pretend that they don't like to be scared. So, I've just kind of started revisiting some of the things that scared me with them, like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, for instance.
Right.
And then the even shorter book, A Dark, Dark Room, where Alvin Schwartz has that traditional tale about the girl with the ribbon, which scared me so much as a kid that I couldn't
Yeah.
even look at that book.
Wow.
And I think that, one of the things I loved, I was reading the beginning of your book and some of the descriptions is you do talk about yourself having been scared a lot as a child. And I wanted to just kind of ask you, in your opinion, why horror? Why write horror if you find yourself afraid a lot? Because that's kind of something that I've noticed with a lot of not just horror fans, but horror authors.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something I've thought a lot about. I mean, I am afraid of the monster under my bed, and the one hiding in my closet, and the one under the stairs, running upstairs from the basement. Um, and a lot of maybe it's therapy, and maybe I approach the fiction and say, okay, I want to try and face some of these fears, but I also want to draw upon them because they're so prevalent. They're so rich and they're so strong, and I can take those fears or that what if, the speculations that I have, and then explore it. Now, for two reasons. Yes, it's therapy because I'm facing my fears. I'm not really, I'm still scared, but I'm also controlling it. And I was talking to Kevin Anderson, science fiction author, during the pandemic about writing during times of turmoil and things like that. During the pandemic, we were talking about that, and he said, "Here's the thing about writing dark stories, is you can, as a reader, you can close it and the monster goes away, like put it away, and as a writer, you can control whether the good defeats evil. We can't do that in the real world. We can't. I mean, and not every horror story. I mean, there are stories that have endings. Like with the I guess the deal that the contract with the reader is like in a longer form. You really the good guys should win. In short fiction, all bets are off because they're not as invested. So you can have that scary ending. But I really think there is some power in being able to funnel those fears onto the page. And what do we do as storytellers? We really want people to feel something. So that's why there is, psychological horror, real world horror, not just the monsters and the creepy things and the unknown and the ghosts. But then there's also that element of dark humor that I can't help but inject in several of my stories. It's whistling past the graveyard, is what I think I'm doing there.
Yeah, the Frosty the Snowman one was special. That one, I really
That's just
laughed.
dark humor.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is pretty great. I don't want to give away for people who have
No,
not
well,
read the
thank
book,
you, but that
but
that is a
that was
family
pretty great.
friendly. That's a family friendly story. I've gone in and read to grade 5 and grade 6 classrooms because again, it's kind of it's not scary, it's more humorous. What if Frosty came to the life? I mean, he doesn't have legs. How would he get around? He'd probably be pretty upset. Oh, the dog peed on him. Like, like
And
like
also, I mean, like how like he comes to life like sort of as an adult. I mean, that
yes.
doesn't seem,
Yeah, he
you're
wasn't
not
born.
learning. You're not like, taking your first steps or learning
Yeah.
how to, I don't know. You're just like, what? I'm here. What am I?
You're thrust, and I had reread Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's amazing novel, the first horror novel, and I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the concept of how dare you create life, because Frankenstein's monster was actually very eloquent and literate. And so beautifully well spoken, it blew my mind when I finally read the book and went, wait a second, this isn't Boris Karloff stomping around. This monster is someone I can empathize with, and I wanted to do that for a snowman. Is Frankenstein's snowman, I guess, is maybe another way of mentioning that one.
No, it was really good.
Thank you.
I loved it. But then a lot of your other stories, just some of the things that I found really compelling was I don't know if quiet horror is even what I would call them, but just like the idea of grief and aging or watching aging and grief. is really scary and upsetting in and of itself, and just the way that, the humanity around either a child or an adult child watching their grandfather, or a friend watching their friend who's grieving a spouse. It's so real and so, I guess, unnerving in a way that I feel like a lot of readers will understand, and it's just so beautifully done. Do stories, do they just sort of come to you? Like, how does each story build for you?
Wow. Well, the story you're talking about being needed actually was inspired when I was in university and I heard a baby crying in the middle of the night. And it was just haunting. And as I wondered, like, what is that the family down the street that just had the baby? How can I hear it so closely? It's like it's right outside my door. That turned into two different stories. Turned into being needed because of like, well, what would happen? And then the thought of when a baby cries, usually the response is to attend to it. And then I was thinking about how they sometimes pair orphanages with seniors residences, and it's great for both of them when they can actually have one another. And I was thinking about the beauty of that, and that's kind of where that story came from. The baby crying episode from when I was in university also inspired a different story. Spirits was which I think appears in there, which is about a haunted theater where you hear a baby crying. Again, the one Genesis led off into two different stories, and I love when I can take the concept. Again, the snowman being alive, I took the concept and I wrote two different stories with two different outcomes, two different feels. I love when I can riff on that because it's almost like this multiverse of, okay, ideas are a dime a dozen. I throw out more ideas before breakfast than I could ever use. But when I can take something and mine it and come up with characters that I think, hopefully resonate with readers the way that resonated with you, then I hope I've done my job.
They did. And, I think it's interesting when you talk to authors, because I feel like for short stories, everything, you have to rely on the rise and the conclusion. It's not, there's plot, but plot has to happen in a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
And your stories, I mean, you do, obviously, 2004, which is when this book was first published, there was no, I don't know what Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days. But there
right.
was that period of time where people did write like two-sentence horror stories on Twitter, and they
Yeah,
were always great. And you included some of yours. Um, and just kind of against the other ones that are a little longer. With short form story, how do you know how long is too long? Like, I know a lot of horror authors will start with something and then it becomes a novella. But
right.
for you, is there a certain amount of beats you feel like you have to hit before the end, or it just ends
No.
when it does?
Honestly, I mean, a lot of what I've written over the years was based on writing for a market that said, and usually 5,000 words was the limit. So that was part of it was, and I don't know how to explain it other than because I'm not a writing instructor kind of person. It just feels right. It feels like the story arc ends here. And I have made the mistake of writing a story that I thought was done. And it was done as a story. I mean, the 10,000 word short story that I tried to cut down to 5,000 words to fit to a market ended up becoming the novel, A Canadian Werewolf in New York. Because to me, I mean, that 10,000 word story had the perfect story arc. It ends, there's a sort of like this open ending. And then I had readers say, well, what happens next? I go, nothing, it's over. He got to his thing. It's a mission accomplished. Yay, it's a funny ending. And they're like, no, but what happens the rest of his day? I liked him. I want to see more. And I was like, oh, God, I didn't think of that. And that, who knew that that was going to spin off into what's now a 7 book series? But I think when it comes to short fiction, you really there's a power in short fiction as well, and I think there's a power in poetry, where you have a limited space and you have to express something in a way that ideally makes the reader feel something, whether it's fear, whether it's happiness, sadness, humor, whatever those elements are. You want them to walk away with some sort of feeling, and you have limited space. And so, almost like every word in a poem, it's even tighter. In a Twitter story, whoa, way tighter. But yeah, you have limited space. So, a lot of it has to do with something I learned in theater, where you have dialogue, but you also have what you're doing with your body, and you're trying to use, again, you're trying to use your senses to put the person in the situation, in the scene. So how can I express this character's motivation through body language, facial gestures, and my voice? And that same sort of thing is what you put into a story.
So what were some of your hide behind the couch things when you were younger? Like what was some of the things that really drew you to horror specifically, be it a story, be it a TV show?
Yeah. The Changeling was on TV with George C. Scott, and I must have snuck out of bed and was sneaking down the hallway to see what my parents were watching. And there's the scene with the ball, and then he goes up the stairs, and the wheelchair starts rolling towards him. And I just remember being so absolutely terrified. And again, it almost takes you back to the monkey's paw and Jacob's and that story. It was almost scarier before the door opened because the tension of what was behind the door was far more terrifying than what you actually saw. We spoke of the master of horror, Stephen King, one of my favorite novels, It. Both, the movie adaptations and the book were way scarier when it was a clown. And then at the very end, when it turned into a giant spider, I'm terrified of spiders, but that was not scary. It was scarier when it was the clown hiding in the sewer, or that can turn into your biggest fear, like a werewolf. And so I think there's something in the unknown that scares me. And I think part of what I'm trying to do in my fiction, because again, like I said earlier, it may be just therapy for me, is maybe I can explore the unknown and face it. And so, yeah, The Changeling was one of them. I think seeing The Exorcist when I was young, way too young to see The Exorcist, was scary too, because again, you lost control. Reagan lost control. Her parents lost control of their daughter. Poltergeist, again, the clown under the bed. But even it is scary enough before the clown shows up under the bed is the tree branches and the shadows. That's something we've all, well, at least us chickens, have experienced when we look outside and you hear the thunder and you're like, oh no, and the storm getting closer and the counting between lightning flashes and the thunder, like it's getting closer and closer. That's like the Jaws theme. It's got that tension so beautifully done. So those are some of those early sort of fears. Heck, Jaws, speaking of Jaws, I wouldn't even go swimming in lakes after seeing that as a kid because I was convinced there was going to be a shark coming to get me.
Yeah, no, I think, you bring together all good points. And there was just a lot of really good anthology horror also that was around a while back. I mean, I'm personally, and I think that that's one of the reasons I really loved One Hand Screaming, is because I really think anthology horror is particularly effective because it is a very specific place and time in a
Yeah.
story, be it like on television or in a book form. The story ends and then you're thinking about it. There's no continuation. And like you said, most of the time, the resolution has to have a bite at the end that does not have, like anybody defeating anybody. Nobody's getting a bigger boat. Nobody's, banishing Pennywise or exercising. It's
Yeah.
still you have the build up, you have what you think is going to be a resolution sometimes, and then like usually there's a bite, and that's why you're always thinking about it. Like that's why people still talk about episodes of The Twilight Zone, even though that show is ridiculously old at that
Yeah.
point, it's still being referenced
Hmm.
in either no novels or riffing on it, or like
Right.
people still take those stories as traditional tale, which actually is interesting because you say traditional tale, a lot of like the now like creepypasta stories that were out on the internet, the earlier days of the internet, are now being called traditional tales. And I'm like,
I
wait, what?
know.
Like I got an ARC of somebody did a novelization of No End House, which I love, by the way. Love, 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 love the original, the first No End House creepypasta. And somebody was, and I haven't read it yet. I'm sure it's wonderful, but th there was like a blurb, like a take on the traditional tale. I'm like, traditional? Like that,
Traditional.
like that was like under 30 years ago. What?
Yeah. I'm thinking traditional is Edgar Allan Poe and
And the Green Ribbon and a
yeah.
Vanishing Hitchhiker story, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is very interesting to me. And I do think there is just something really, really special about short form horror. And I love that you revisited this. So that kind of brings me to how was it coming back after 20 years, opening that door
Yeah.
again, adding to it, seeing how your writing has changed?
You know what? One of the hardest things was actually cutting stuff. I had a limit because of the printing and the way this was getting distributed. I had a page count limit I had to stick to in order to keep a budget because of pre-sales and things like that. And so I had a good 30, 40,000 words of stories that I would have loved to include in sort of like a best of, but I had to include all the originals. And then I had to add them, so I had to cut stuff. So that was fun because it felt like, oh, okay, I didn't just make it. In 20 years, I have just enough stories to double the size of the original. I can now say, oh, I'm not going to use this for this reason. I'm going to use this because I need a story like that. And this is the way when I added an anthology of other people's works, I go, well, these stories are all great, but I can only fit so many. So the storytelling aspect of putting them together was so much fun. And the other thing is, when I did it 20 years ago, I backed myself into a corner and I had procrastinated and deadline and stuff like that. So I'd learned a lot over the years. And and this time around, I really wanted to make it something special. I had a beer brewed in collaboration with the book. So I was working in collaboration with a brewer who did a beer called One Hop Screaming, which was done. And I wrote a story specifically about a haunted beer so he could put a QR code on the label. And while you're drinking the beer, you could read a haunted story, which is really just an ode to beer nerd friends I had, including the brewer who wanted to be. Um, did he want to be? No, the manager of the one beer establishment wanted to be the murderer, and the brewer was a victim. Uh, so again, it was an incredible return to something, and it was so much fun because when I'm launching a book, it's you've got the one story, the one set of characters, the one overarching theme or the thing that they have to resolve. Here, I could pick and choose. I could read a poem, a dark humor poem that's supposed to make people feel uncomfortable and laugh, and then I could read a really short story. I think I did do the snowman story when it was a mixed audience of young people and old people. And then, there's the story of the escaped convict, which is also, I think it was only about 1,000 words. And it's like, well, that's a nice short one because the last thing you want to do when you go to an event or reading is to just hear the reading, even though I like to do a very animated version and the voices and all that stuff. But, you want to get into more of the interactive stuff in the short because if they're not liking it, well, it's over quickly.
Now that this is out, what are you working on now? I know that you said you have something coming on with a traditional publisher. Don't
Yeah.
know if you're allowed to talk about that. I know they're usually pretty under wraps, and I know that you also said you have more self-publishing.
Yeah. Well, I signed with Hamilton, Ontario publisher, Wolsack and Wynn, to do a book because Hamilton's on Lake Ontario, Ghosts of the Great Lakes, and it's going to cover ghost stories from all of the Great Lakes, which is exciting. And so that's coming out next year, 2026. I haven't started that one. It's not due till December, so I'll get started probably doing the research as I try to circumnavigate at least Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, both sides, and get some stories from locales. I'm also working on the next book in my Canadian Werewolf series, which is called A Canadian Werewolf in London, Ontario, where I have my Michael Andrews comes back to his stomping grounds in Ontario, Canada, and starts looking into his past a little bit more. And then of course, I mean, I'm still working. I've actually working on that collection is really upped my game to return to short fiction. I used to do nothing but short fiction, and I've just enjoyed it. I've been writing for anthologies that I've been asked to submit to or to contribute to, and I've had so much fun because between large book projects, writing a short story is like not like a palate cleanser. And it's something fun because you can, in 5,000 words, you can have that sense of satisfaction that it takes a lot longer to get from 100,000 words. And you can rewrite it 10 times, and it takes a lot less time than rewriting a novel 10 times.
Awesome. Well, One Hand Screaming, the updated 20 Haunting Years is awesome. You can get it.
If you go to books to read, that books the number two read.com/Mark Lusky, you can find links to all of the major retailers. That is available in hardcover, in paperback, in ebook, and in audiobook format now.
Really?
And it is available through all libraries. So if you want to get it for free from your local library, I request just ask for it and they can order it. It's available through Ingram and Lit Disco, which are the print distribution, and the audiobook and the ebook are available through all the major platforms that libraries can order through.
That's really great. And just really quickly with the audiobook, how did that work? Is it the same narrator for each story? Do you have different ones?
No, I'm glad you asked. I have five different narrators, including me. I did some of the short ones in the poetry and the author's notes. And I have Scott Overton, who's done some of my books. I have Eric Brian Moore. I have Aaron Fors. And I'm missing two other, Chris Humphreys. And there's another gentleman who did one of my stories. So some of those stories had been done before for other projects. So I just thought, why not use as many great talented narrators as possible? And that was a really fun project to do.
Awesome. Well, Mark, this was wonderful. Check out One Hand Screaming. Check out all of Mark's books. And I do hope to see you back soon. I'm curious about the Lake Erie, the
Oh
Great
yeah.
Lakes ghost stories, because that's got to be a really interesting research project.
Oh, so far all the books I've bought are fun, and then I get to travel and go talk to people. That will be so much fun.
Even better. All right.
Thanks, Jessica.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mark. We are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.